Can sit here, people.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Father Morrison Malaysia, we welcome you to this book talk by Burnet on his latest publication, East Indies. Ian is no stranger to us. I think most of us have met him last year. It's like homecoming for a friend, practically. So we welcome him and his dear wife here with us here. So now the talk will be on his latest book, East Indies. I think most of you have seen the notice, so I will not talk too much on that. For tonight, after the talk, we will have the books on sale, and I'm very pleased to inform you that the usual price of the book is 95 ringgit, but for tonight, we are going to price it at 85 ringgit per book. So there's a slight discount for the book for those of you who wish to buy a book. And we have Ian with us to autograph the books as well, so there's a bit of a bonus. So without much further ado, I have great pleasure in Ian to talk.
Thank you, Colin. I think you can hear me okay, I hope. Good. So thanks to Burnet and Malaysia and to Colin for organising the event today, and thanks to Burnet at the back for providing this wonderful venue. It's terrific. So East Indies, the book's just been published, so it's very new, and you can see immediately where we are in Malacca. So I'm very pleased to be here to talk about Malacca and the East Indies, and I'm sure you already recognise a number of the landmarks that are around here in Malacca. So what the book does, I say it follows the trade routes, the trade winds to the port cities all around the East Indies, which is really defined as the whole area from the Malay Peninsula right across towards New Guinea. So this, I think many of you would be familiar with the area, but if not, we've got Aceh, Penang, Malacca, Singapore, Bencoolen, Banten, Batavia, Makassar, Larantuka, Ambon, Banda, and Ternate. And just out of interest, at the end, I'll show you a little map. But I left Ternate on the 5th of November, so just 2 days ago, and we had a 12-day trip sailing around the Spice Islands. So that's the area we're talking about. The book also talks about Canton, Nagasaki, and Macau. But today we'll just focus on the Malacca and the archipelago. Is that my phone? Sorry about that. There we go. So just to give you an idea how the book is structured, so we've got part 1, the Portuguese, and these are all the port cities that the book describes. Part 2, the Dutch, again the port cities, and part 3, the English. And of course Malacca is significant because we've got Portuguese Malacca, Dutch Malacca, and then British Malacca. So it's all through the book, the theme of Malacca keeps occurring. So for centuries before 1497, in fact for millennia, there was a relatively peaceful trade in spices by the Chinese, the Arabs, the Indians, all the way across the Middle East, either on the Silk Road or the spice route, and then across into the Mediterranean to Venice, which is the main distribution point for spices through Europe. But that all changed in 1497 when Vasco da Gama rounded the Cape of Good Hope and reached Calicut in India. So now the spices that would have normally travelled by camels across the Middle East could be shipped in bulk around the Cape of Good Hope to Lisbon, and the whole dynamics of the trade changed. So this is a Portuguese map. But I've just put the sequence of events on here, so you know that the Portuguese captured Java in 1509, they captured Malacca in 1511, they got to Ternate and Banda in the Spice Islands in 1512 to get cloves and nutmeg, which only grew in those islands, and then to Timor and Solor in 1516 for sandalwood, again, which only grew in those islands. Burnet in 1516 for pepper, which of course originally grew in India, but now grew in both Sumatra and Java. And then by 1517 they'd reached Macau for the China trade, and then on to Nagasaki for the Japanese trade in silver, which the Portuguese could exchange in Canton for Chinese silks and porcelains. So for almost 100 years, the Portuguese had a monopoly on trade right throughout the Orient and created what's known as the Portuguese seaboard empire. So just a few maps and charts to show you. So this is a very early chart or image of Malacca when there was just the Port Letza. It was built at the very entrance to the river. So there was no construction, nothing really much showing except a small church on the hill there. And of course, that's 1536, so not only 20 years or so after the initial capture of Malacca. So Portugal grew wealthy on this trade. Lisbon replaced Venice as the entry port for spices into Europe. And if you've been to Lisbon, it doesn't look very much different today. But all the spices would be coming in the warehouses here and shipped off to Europe, and especially to Holland. Because Holland became the north, and Amsterdam, Rotterdam became the northern distribution centers for spices throughout northern Europe. And King Manuel of Portugal became known as Manuel the Fortunate, or the Grocer King, because these were grocery goods that were being distributed. And we get an idea of the value of the trade from 1592, when English pirates captured the Portuguese ship Madre de Dios off the Azores. So this single ship contained 435 tons of pepper, 45 tons of cloves, 35 tons of cinnamon, 4 tons of mace, 4 tons of nutmeg, ebony, ivory, gold, all the other goods that they were bringing to Europe. So when those goods were auctioned in London, they bought at a value of £500,000 sterling, which was equivalent to half of England's treasury at the time. So that gives you an idea of the wealth of these ships that the Portuguese were bringing back to Lisbon and into Europe. And you wouldn't be surprised that only 10 years later the English East India Company was founded as a joint stock company to profit from that same trade. And of course the Dutch also wanted to profit. So in 1595 you have both the Dutch and the English challenging the Portuguese and bringing their own spices back to Europe. So this is a map that was done after the first Dutch voyage in 1595. So there were 4 ships that got to Banten here and traded in pepper. But the expedition was really a disaster. Only half or a third of the men actually survived and got back to Holland. And they didn't bring back a great amount of spices either. But they had proved that the Dutch could sail to the East Indies. And the subsequent voyage in 1915, 98 was a huge success. The investors made a 400% profit on their investment, and they bought back tons and tons of pepper and other spices. So then there was companies floated in Amsterdam, well, this one in Amsterdam, but then Rotterdam, Hoorn, Zeeburg, I guess it's called, many other ports around Holland. And but the Dutch realised that to challenge the Portuguese, they would have to have a united company rather than individual companies. So that's when the Dutch East India Company was formed in 1602. And it was the world's first joint stock company with a permanent capital. So it was a precursor to all the modern companies of today. And also obviously the first multinational company. Because the English East India Company had been formed the year before, but it was a joint stock company, but with no permanent capital. Just capital was raised for each single voyage, and then paid off and raised for the next voyage. So in 1603, so the Portuguese returning from this particular vessel, the Santa Catarina, returning from Macau would have followed this route, returning to Malacca, but they couldn't sail through the strait. None of the vessels could sail through the Straits of Singapore except in daylight because of the shoals and the dangers there. So the Santa Catarina anchored overnight at the entrance to the Strait of Singapore, and early that next morning the so-called Dutch pirates, which was the VOC, attacked and captured the Santa Catarina. And those goods were taken back to Amsterdam to be auctioned. And there were 100,000 pieces of Chinese porcelain on the vessel, plus other goods. And they were auctioned in Amsterdam for 3.5 million guilders, which doubled the paid-up capital of the Dutch East Indies Company in a single day. So again, we get another idea of the value of these trading vessels. And of course, we can see Malacca, well, not very well, but Malacca's here on the map at that point. So the Dutch East Indies Company are very much in business now, and in 1605 they sent their first war fleet to the East Indies and captured the Portuguese forts in Ambon, Tidore and Banda. And this is an image of the Dutch fleet capturing the Portuguese Fort Mariaco on Tidore, which actually exploded. There was a fire, especially the gunpowder negatives, and the whole fort went up in the air. But that was the beginning of the decline of the Portuguese Empire, and consequently the Dutch forced the Portuguese out of most of the East Indies. Now the Dutch were anxious to capture Malacca, because Malacca was the fulcrum of all the trade, east-west and west-east. And they made their first attempt in 1606, and there were 2 or 3 subsequent attempts to capture Malacca. So this is it must be a more recent painting, but it depicts the sea battle between the Cornelius Matelief was Slut, who led the Dutch fleet, and the Spanish-Portuguese fleet at that time. So the Dutch were actually outnumbered and withdrew to fight another day. So by 1619, the Dutch East India Company had founded Batavia, again on the model of a typical Dutch city. So it was built at sea level with access directly up the Chillawong River into the city, and the warehouses and spice trading houses. And we've got Castile Batavia there, which protected the entrance into Batavia, and the main warehouses were all built here along that river. And if you visit Jakarta, you can still see a lot of that, the old city. It's still there, but a lot of it is still crumbling. So by 1669, we'll go forward, the Dutch had already captured Malacca, they'd already captured Makassar, and so and of course the Ambon, Mate. So they had established a complete monopoly over the spice trade from the East Indies. Now Malacca in 1629 was attacked by the Archimedes, and what happened was, after the Portuguese had captured Malacca, a lot of the trade that would have gone through the Straits of Malacca now came around the west side of Sumatra to Aceh, and there were Arabian and Indian vessels coming across to collect spices from them. So the Sultan of Aceh grew wealthy, and he used that wealth to attack Malacca in 1629. So this is a view of the single Portuguese ship being attacked by the Archimedes fleet, and of course the gun batteries from Formosa, the Portuguese fort. And these are actually gun batteries that have been set up by the Archimedes to fire on Malacca itself. But that there was a long siege, 2 or 3 months or longer, but eventually Malacca was relieved by a Portuguese armada that then captured almost all of the Archimedes fleet. And it's interesting that the Sultan of Malacca, of course, had moved to Johor, so that the descendants of the Sultan of Malacca were now the Sultans of Johor. But actually, Johor had allied with Malacca against the Archimedes, which goes to prove the older days that my enemy's enemy is my friend. So there we go. This is Malacca after its capture by the Dutch East India Company in 1641. So again, you can see the Formosa and the fort that had been built all around the mount, and of course the Malacca River had been diverted to create a moat, a protected moat, and it was considered impregnable. But finally, after I think it was the 3rd or 4th attempt, the Dutch, in a long siege, the Dutch succeeded in capturing Malacca. So that very first image we saw, which is also on the wall up there, is an image of Malacca with Dutch ships in the foreground after its capture. So that's the end. That's the Portuguese story, then the Dutch story, and now we'll get to the English. So by 1657, the English had lost the race for spices. They'd been forced by the Dutch, been forced out of the East Indies. Their warehouses on the Thames lay empty, and the directors of the English East India Company met and agreed that they would wind up the company and it would cease operations. Of course, it had been granted a royal charter by Queen Elizabeth I, so it required royal assent to actually wind up the company. And by that time, Oliver Cromwell was not a royal leader, but the leader of England. And he demanded that the company actually be recapitalized and reinvigorated. So the future of the English East India Company now was going to be in India. They had ports or bases in Bombay, Madras, and subsequently in Calcutta. And Fort William was established in the early 1700s. And you can see this image by 1735. A very substantial fort existed on the banks of the Hooghly River in Bengal. But the fort was captured in 1756 by the Nawab of Bengal, and if you've heard of the Black Hole of Calcutta, that was when 143, or they say up to 143, British or English prisoners were held overnight in a holding cell in the dungeons with inadequate ventilation. So by the next morning, only 43 of those men and women had survived the night. So there was a demand for revenge, and the English East India Company put together a 3,000-man army led by Robert Clive, who later became known as Clive of India. And his 3,000 men defeated the 12,000-man army of the Nawab of Bengal, presumably through superior artillery, superior military tactics, and also a conspiracy. And Robert Clive had made a conspiracy, a conspiracy with this man, Mir Jafar, that in the battle, Mir Jafar would hold his troops neutral during the battle. And the reward being that Mir Jafar would then become the ruler of Bengal under English authority. And they would jointly share the proceeds of the Bengal treasure, which was immense. And Robert Clive personally profited by millions and millions of pounds. So now the English were firmly established in Bengal, and the trade from there would begin. So most of the English trade was with China. The tea was the main source of, become the biggest trading commodity that the English had. But what they used for that trade was mainly opium. So the English East India Company gave themselves a monopoly on the production, processing, packaging, and shipment of all the opium from Bengal to China. Now there's a story where there were 4 opium ships anchored in Tanjung Pinang, which is just south of Singapore, on their way to China. 3 of them departed and left one boat alone in the harbour. For whatever reason, I don't know what the reason was. But the Dutch and Malacca conspired with Raja Haji from Tanjung Pinang to capture that one vessel, and they would share the proceeds. But unfortunately, Raja Ali was left out of the share of the proceeds, and decided that he would extract retribution by attacking Malacca. So attacked, we've had the Dutch attack Malacca, the Japanese attack Malacca, known as the Bugis attacking Malacca. So this image is from the Dutch Van Braam fleet that actually landed in Malacca and Selangor to relieve the siege that the Buginese had placed on Malacca itself. Now the Dutch controlled the Straits of Sunda, and they controlled the Straits of Malacca. So it was imperative for the British to have some presence in the Straits of Malacca to control all that trade to China. So as you probably know, in 1786, Francis Light founded a settlement on the island of Penang, which is there. So Penang became a foothold for the British, or the English, and but it wasn't. It was a good foothold, I guess, but it certainly wasn't a good trading foothold, because all the trade that was coming from the archipelago would go to the Rio Islands or Tanjung Pinang first, to Malacca second, and finally up, if there was any trade left up to Penang in the very northern part of the Malacca Straits. So 1795 was a crucial year. That was when the French invaded the Netherlands. Napoleon Bonaparte, 1795 was the French Revolution. 1806, Napoleon Bonaparte invaded the Netherlands and installed his brother Louis as the ruler. And 2 years later, Napoleon sent Marshal Dandel's, if that name is familiar, to Java to raise the French flag over the topic. So now the French would control the Straits of Sunda, and also through the Rio Islands and Malacca, the Straits of Malacca. So that was England's first. That was the English East India Company's worst nightmare. So plans were made to invade Java, and Thomas, as he was then known, Thomas Raffles, was crucial to that plan. He came to Pulau Penang as Assistant Secretary and quickly rose up the ladder through his own ambition and application to become the first Secretary. He was then appointed the Special Agent to the Governor General of India in Malacca to plan for the English invasion of Batavia. So this shows you the route of the invasion fleet. There was, I think, over 100 vessels and over 100,000 troops and sailors. So it's probably the biggest fleet this part of the world has ever seen, even after the Second World War. And they were successful in capturing Batavia, and as you know, Thomas Raffles of Stanford Raffles became the Lieutenant Governor from 1811 to 1816, when the English returned Batavia to the Dutch after the Treaty of, I think it's the Treaty of Amiens, Treaty of Paris, I'm not sure. So Raffles returned to England. He was then knighted and became Sir Stanford Raffles. And of course, as you know, he was instrumental in continuing or making permanent the English presence by founding, together with William Farquhar, who was the Governor of Malacca, by founding the settlement of Singapore in 1819. And so the English presence was now firmly established in the Malacca Straits, and as you know, eventually there was a treaty in 1824 between the English and the Dutch, where the English retained Malaya and Singapore, and the Dutch retained Sumatra, and Bencoolen and Malacca were exchanged in that in the Treaty of London. So that gives us an overall look of the different trading companies, the Portuguese, the Dutch, and then the English, and their influence on the Malacca Straits and Malacca. So I'll leave it at that point. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. These are the books. So we see these, as I said, just been published. And there are copies there today. Spice Islands is currently out of print, but there is a second printing which is on its way, and hopefully will be here in a few months. So look out for that if you want to. And really what Spice Islands gives an overall view, the 2,000-year history of the spice trade, from BC times up to the 1800s. And of course, East Indies is just focused on the trading companies from that period of 1497